Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Mathew Whiz Buckley. His work with No Fallen Heroes Foundation is transforming the lives of individuals who, for all intents and purposes, were kind of abandoned by their country and the people they've served. And his foundation are not just serving vets, those are first responders, and people like you who may be hiding from your trauma while continuing down a horribly self-destructive path. No Fallen Heroes Foundation is bringing people back to their communities, to their families, and making a massive, massive difference. At the end of part 1 of this show, by the way, if you missed part 1, you should go back and re-listen to it. There's some profound insights from Mathew. It's a phenomenal conversation, talking about that the number of vet suicides is grossly underestimated. In fact, it's double what the government says it is. And Mathew brought up that he talked about his experience with ibogaine in psychedelic retreats. His foundation is helping people to get to have this experience because this experience is illegal in the United States. Now, I think there are a couple of states that have started to move around that a little bit independently, but as a sort of general thing, it's illegal. And they're making this thing work for people. Now, why is that? Well, let's talk about that, Mathew. Let's jump back into that. Do you believe this is, and by the way, just in case you don't know, folks, there's a ton of data research. You may know that I interviewed Professor Adam Safron about using psilocybin, phenomenal research. This is very powerful. There's a lot of research backing it up, and yet it's still, quote, illegal. Mathew, what's your thoughts on this?
There's no money to be made in healed people. Big Pharma makes a lot of money with getting you hooked on things that mask or maybe hide the symptoms, right? Dov, I'll tell you, man, I've been to D.C. a couple times to lobby, quote unquote, for this. Democrats are already there, right? Most of the Democrats are already there. It's the Republicans. It's the anti-drug. Drugs are bad. But behind closed doors, when I give my pitch, I'll get a Whiz. I like what you're doing, but you're going to have a problem with Big Pharma and the alcohol and tobacco lobbies. I'm like, is that your job? What are you talking about? I'm going to have a problem. So, Dov, if you look at the harm to others and harm to you scale, all the way on the left, the biggest one is alcohol. It's the most legal, most destructive drug out there. I told you a drunk driver killed my sister, man. So you got alcohol over here, you got tobacco. All the way on the right side of that scale that's almost insignificant is psilocybin. So it's interesting that these medicines are illegal. If you know the history of our first psychedelic revolution, that in the early 60s, as Vietnam starting to get going, mid-60s, here's a rifle, go on the other side of the planet and kill the yellow man who you've never met before. I don't want to do that. I love the yellow man. Oh, why do you love the yellow man? Well, I took these mushrooms, and I love everybody. Okay, now those are illegal. Here's your rifle, and you're still going to go kill that guy, right? So it's clear. These medicines, iboga, psilocybin, have been used for thousands and thousands of years. But here in the West, the hubris of man to take a plant that God, the universe, divine source, creator, put on this planet for us to heal, we made that illegal. Well, you can drink yourself to death, you can smoke yourself to death, and you can take opioids. We have a fentanyl crisis in this country that's killing so many people. So, Dov, I told you on the last brief with ibogaine, being a drinker, up to 8 months after the ibogaine, if I looked at alcohol or smelled it, it made me retch. Now, if I choose to, I can have a glass of wine with my ribeye or something like that. But old Whiz, a glass of wine was 2 bottles, maybe even 3 if I'm in the mood. Holy shit, man. It destroyed alcohol in my life. 85% of heroin addicts, deep in it heroin addicts, up to 3 years after a single ibogaine experience, never look at, touch, think about heroin again. So it's almost a rhetorical question, isn't it, Dov? Why are these medicines, do you think, still illegal? And then as you and I alluded to towards the end of session 1 there, I got to be honest with you, bro, going from being a meat-eating, killing machine trained by the U.S. government to stop. I used to see countries and race and sex and political belief. Now I see souls. I see imperfect shells that all need work, but underneath that stuff, like I told you, when God looked at me on ibogaine, he's like, son, I don't make imperfect things, buddy. Get up, get up. This sucks. I get it. And I can help you with that. But underneath, I got a tour. Dov. I got a tour of everything, and it's supposed to be perfect. It's funny because people are like, tell me about your trip, man. I'm like, this is the trip. What I experienced, love, and the only moment that mattered was the present moment. There wasn't any past with God. There wasn't any future with God. It was perfect and love in the now. Look at what we did to this thing, man. God was like, dude, you're supposed to be loving each other. This is supposed to be good. I tell people this is hell. This is purgatory, man. War, racism, poverty, hate. So very long answer to your short question, bro, is I think these medicines, the healing capabilities of these medicines are so powerful. There ain't no money in it. And let me tell you something, running around the psychedelic space, it's funny when I go to these conferences, I'm like, all right, all the dudes in the khaki pants and polo shirts are either feds or they're big pharma executives. And there's not too much daylight between those two. But here's what they're doing, Dov. So Whiz took ibogaine, 12 to 14-hour experience. Why don't we change a couple molecules and name it ibogaine and charge 20 grand? And you can do it between car line and your yoga class. That's what's happening. But God is a smart pharmacologist. You can't trademark a fungus and you can't patent root bark, but they're going to try.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I know Big Pharma right now is speaking with forked tongue. They're kind of bad-mouthing this stuff. They can't fully, because I guarantee, Dov, the day is going to come when the CEO of Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna comes into the psychedelic space with their size 12 checkbook and goes, yeah, we now own all of you. And it's heartbreaking for me because I know that's going to happen. I teach people how to trade, so I jokingly tell people I'm bipolar. Half of me is like, good, I want that to happen. I own a bunch of the public psychedelic stocks. The other half of me is physically ill that that's going to happen. But with the money I make on this over here, I throw into the foundation and save lives. So I'm kind of torn, Dov. I love that healing can get to more people, maybe.
Well, I think there's a shadow to everything. What I mean by that, let's look at John Boehner, how anti-marijuana he was. When he stopped being Speaker of the House, he's now the lobbyist for that. So it's like, okay, come on. So the bottom line is it comes down to profit. You've got someone who is anti-gay marriage until they realize that their child is gay. And then suddenly they're pro. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that that's an awakening, and that's cool. But there's a lot of people who it's not an awakening. It's simply about profit. I want to come back to a part of the conversation that you probably don't usually go down to, which is when you talk about this perfect soul and then you talk about the shell. It's really important, I think, that the people who live in the shell are often either completely ignorant of that perfect soul within them, or they are maliciously ignorant of it with themselves and with others. And so everything's about profiting in this world and trying to make their lives better at the cost of anyone and everything. In many ways, that agenda is exactly what is programmed into a military person. This is your mission, and this is your only mission. And this is what you do, and you protect those who are also on that mission. Well, isn't that big profit? Isn't that exactly what the military-industrial complex or big pharma are doing? It doesn't matter about your humanity. It doesn't matter that children are dying in this horrible war, wherever that war is. And by the way, just in case people are not aware, because I know the news is being eaten up by Gaza right now, and we may have forgotten about the Ukraine a little bit, but let's remember that the U.S. military is involved in 73 wars as we speak. 73, whether that's providing weaponry or actively involved. So let's not pretend that America is a peacekeeping country. It's not. It's a warring country. It's the most warring country in the history of mankind. Now, that doesn't mean Americans are. It means the machine that runs it is. And that's the military-industrial complex. And for a guy who was at the service of the military-industrial complex, as you said, you were a killing machine, talk to us about that transformation, because you're on one side, you're conditioned to be totally tunnel vision. I'm fighting for my country for freedom, whatever that is. And then suddenly you're aware that I've been conned.
Dov, it's interesting. I think in the first episode, we talked about that compartmentalization, right? As a fighter pilot, they go out of their way in training to compartmentalize you, man. If you and I are pressing into a target and you get smoked, I don't stop and start crying and curl up into the fetal position. I'm like, Dov's dead. I got to press onto the target. I'll mourn him later. Well, guess what happens? You land, there's another mission, you don't get to mourn Dove later, and now another buddy dies. And all these compartments get pushed and pushed and pushed until, as you said, they're leaking, and then that leak ends up hitting your powder magazine and your whole thing explodes. So the military goes out of their way to compartmentalize you, to train you how to we talk about being in our bubble. Like after we brief our flight, there's time before we leave the briefing room and walk out to the jet. Ain't no looking at the cell phone, ain't no calling the wife. Commanding officer's not coming to you to ask when that report is. You're, quote, in your bubble. You're supposed to be left alone so you can stay focused. So that compartmentalization, why do I bring that up? Because when I was flying the Hornets and then activated for Operation Iraqi Freedom, holy crap, man. At the time, wrap yourself up in the flag. George Bush is saying this is what needs to happen. We end up invading a sovereign country and we end up killing hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqi civilians. Last time I checked, that's a war crime, man. And we've kind of put that in our rearview mirror. So I think that was also part of my kind of circle in the drain we talked about in the first episode, where I'm like, dude, was it all bullshit? The 16 buddies whose wife got a flag folded on their mantle, was it all bullshit? And then you see, for 20 years in this country, generals and admirals at the green table. Well, Congresswoman, thanks for that question. Everything's going great in Afghanistan and Iraq. We just need a shitload more money and these cool Gucci defense systems to kill more people. Thank you. It was a lie. 2 decades of lies that everything's going great. And then that general or admiral retires and they go to Raytheon, they go to Boeing, they go to Northrop Grumman, and make their 6 figures even more. It's disgusting. There is a revolving door between the Pentagon and the defense industry. One of the only generals in American history who was worth a shit was General Eisenhower. Won World War II along with the Allies, became president, and he warned us. He coined the term, beware of the military. He looked good on the industries in World War II. We need jeeps, tanks, and airplanes and ships. American might said, we can build those businesses. After the war ended, Eisenhower knew, he's like, they probably don't want to throttle back anytime soon. They're making a shitload of money. So we came up with new boogeymen. North Korea, invade South Korea. Remember the whole domino theory? It's going to domino. Everything's going to fall. Failure. North Vietnam, South Vietnam. If we don't stop the North Vietnamese, they're going to be in Hawaii tomorrow. Bullshit. They're all lying to us, man, because it is all about the profit. And I got a lot of brothers and sisters who I served with who work for these companies. I love them. Be the change you want to see, right? So I'm just trying to lead with my truth. It's so funny, man, because some people are like, dude, do you start your own car? I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, whether it's the defense industry or big pharma or the alcohol or tobacco lobbies that you're poking on. I don't know if it's truth. It is to me. So I'm going to speak it no matter what, because I have learned of in the past couple of years, I should have known this for 5 decades. I didn't. When you lead with your heart and your truth, you can never fail. So I'd like to think maybe I'm a little divinely protected, man. Whatever's supposed to happen is going to happen, but I am not going to stop speaking out.
You know, it's interesting because I will openly say I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, and I don't believe him when he says he won't go to war. I don't believe him at all, because if there's profit in it, he'll do whatever it takes. But I also don't believe the other side when they say they won't go to war. These are conjoined triplets, military, industrial, pharmacy, with the governments, because there's so much money in these things that the corruption is inherent. And the sad thing for me is that I believe, not everyone, but let's go 95%, maybe I'm being generous, maybe I'm not. 95% of people who go into politics actually want to make a difference. They give a shit about their country, but they get seduced by the money and the power and all the rest of it. And it's a very sad situation. I fell in love with America at 10 years old. I was born in the UK. When I heard Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream, and my mother was crying when he was assassinated. And I couldn't understand why a poor Jewish woman on the other side of the world, like we were piss poor, was crying about a black Christian minister who'd been assassinated. It was beyond me. That pulled me. And then JFK got killed. I can remember being devastated as a kid. This is all bizarre to me. And then thinking about all that, I was pulled towards America. I was very pulled towards the US and what it meant to, and then as I started to speak about American politics, I've analyzed American politics even to this day. It's fascinating to me that how far it has strayed from that. You say in the last 20 years, and I would argue a lot longer than 20 years, when you went to war with Iraq, I was like, come on. And as you said, boogeymen, whoever they happen to be. Muhammad Ali said when he became a conscientious objector, why would I sign up to go to the other side of the world and kill people who are not white like me? Come on, there's something wrong with this. But it's sold to us as a general as this is patriotism. And I think that this is part of the challenge, is that people don't question, what does patriotism mean? I believe, not the truth, I believe a patriot is somebody who believes in their country enough to question the morality and the behavior of its country. I'm a patriot because I will question this. I know who I voted for in Canada, and I know I want to punch myself in the neck for voting for that person. That was a bad choice. But I can own that, and because I voted for, I can criticize. When you vote against, you can't criticize. You're just voting against. So it's already over. They didn't get in, you voted against them, so it's over. No, you have to vote for, and you have to be willing to criticize that. And I think that particularly people who've been brainwashed inside of a military system often get brainwashed away from that thinking through the compartmentalization that you talked about. How do we wake people up, Whiz, and not just to ibogaine and how the big pharma and the military industrial complex are pulling people away from being healed? How do we wake people up? That's a big question for me.
It's a huge question. Real quick, though, it's interesting, the definition of a patriot. I'm a nerd. I don't get out too much, but on Amazon Prime, I watched a series on Washington and then on Lincoln too. But on Washington, we forget that the founding fathers of the United States were terrorists. They were insurrectionists. They were traitors. They were treasonists. They talk about patriots, man, whether it's taxation or all sorts of stuff. They're like, man, it is our duty. This is our country to speak up against injustice and stuff like that, not to just keep going along with the flow, man.
Well, as I often say, the only difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter is how the media label you.
That's exactly right. One man's terrorists, another man's freedom fighters. And old me would pick a side pretty damn quickly. New me just kind of pulls back a little bit. We were speaking about the boogeyman. I think Vladimir Putin's a war criminal, should be tried, executed, arrested. But let me back up a little bit. Cold War, man. Ronald Reagan's Star Wars. We bankrupted the Soviet Union. We won. Let's be friends. George Bush Jr. said he could see inside Putin's soul a good dude. James Baker promised Gorbachev, he said, not 1 inch east. We don't need NATO. We're all buddies now. NATO existed, and what did we do? All the way up to Ukraine. So, again, we created another boogeyman. Russia's like, dude, I thought we were all buddies, man. I thought that shit was in the past. And here we are again, the world at war. October 7th broke my heart. What's going on in Gaza equally breaks my heart. It's amazing to me. I see one headline that says, Biden or Harris delivering hundreds of millions in food. And the next headline is, delivering weapons to Israel. I'm like, am I the only person that steps outside and looks? We're giving food and medical stuff to the people being attacked, and we're supplying weapons to the attackers. Are you fucking insane? Clearly, I'm the idiot because people like go, oh, of course you can. But long answer to your short question, Dov, the world in the United States, we're in a nosedive, bro. The rise of these healing medicines, the first psychedelic kind of revolution, not that I'm going to besmirch hippies on this podcast, but the American public listened to Uncle Sam, didn't they? These people are subversive. They're not patriotic. And what are they doing? Whatever substances they're doing should be felonies illegal. Maybe God, this time around, with this psychedelic new revolution, has a Marcus Luttrell, a lone survivor. Or I'm nobody special, but maybe if mom and pop on the streets can look at a Navy fighter pilot or a Navy SEAL or an NFL player, or a guy on my board of my foundation is a 2-time Stanley Cup champ who just had a ton of concussions because he was a goon too. Completely rewired his brains with these medicines. So maybe this time around, mom and pop can say, all right, we got veterans, first responders. Dov, I got to be honest, man. On my grant request list, I have active law enforcement. I have state troopers. I have sheriffs, and I have police officers. Could you imagine what would happen in policing if a compassionate officer showed up? Not one who's pissed off at himself, his life, all sorts of shit, and showed up full of compassion. I mean, we tried to get there in the States a little bit ago, right? We're going to start setting social workers to calls. I'm like, oh my God, I get what they were trying to do, but how about you help heal those folks first?
But again, that's not profitable to heal those folks. It's more profitable to keep the prison industrial complex going, because that's a for-profit gain as well.
Don't even get me started, man. I can't even believe that there are prisons in this country that are owned by companies.
No, not there are.
Let that
The
happen?
majority are. People have no idea. The majority of prisons are privately owned, and the more full they are, the more profit they make, and the less quality of food they feed their people, or the less they rehabilitate, the better it is for profit. And if you don't get your head around that, right now, you're in big trouble, because you do not see what's going on. You can't understand the military-industrial complex. You can't understand Big Pharma. You can understand that the United States, up until very recently, was the most incarcerated population of any country in the world, because it's for profit. That's it. It's for profit.
Dov, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I said this on my podcast a while ago. I caught some flack for it, but I'm going to lay it on you.
Good.
The rate of recidivism in this country it's sad. They're going to be back. A criminal, before they are paroled, should be allowed to sit with psychedelic-assisted therapy. I guarantee you it would destroy the I'm a criminal, I'm a failure. Most of these criminals had horrific childhoods, man. If you could give these guys and some gals a clean piece of paper when they left that institution, if they're supposed to be reforming these people in there, right? It's punishment.
Well, they're refining them for the lifestyle that they were arrested for. They're not reforming. They're making them better criminals.
If we could heal those people before they get back on the street, I guarantee you crime would go down. And of course, you want to give prawns to crime. I'm like, these plant medicines folks aren't made in a lab with a dude in a lab coat and a beaker focused on profit. Somebody put these things around in order for us to heal, and we made them illegal. And this was all a very long answer, short question. People have to heal. Things are only going to get worse if we don't do some inner work instead of getting on Twitter and yelling at our political opposition and throwing spears. I tell people, if you're going to throw a knife at somebody, make sure there's a note attached. Hey, man, how do I get better? How do I be a better human being? If you're going to throw a knife at somebody, make sure there's a note attached. And we use that same ethos in a fighter squadron. If you attended a fighter squadron debrief, you'd think we hate each other. When that door closes, you're allowed to, before it gets ugly, it might not get ugly if you do what first? We go around the room in a debrief before we start the debrief, and you are allowed to self-identify. All right, fellas, I was 20 feet off altitude today. My airspeed control sucked. I put a bomb so far off target. You better call the State Department. That's what I saw. I gooned up on this mission. What do you have for me? And if I did something wrong that I didn't self-identify, they're going to lay into me. So in a fighter squadron, man, we hold each other accountable. We hold ourselves accountable because we want to get better. When that debrief's over and the door opens up, we're best friends again, man. You look at the Blue Angels fly 18 inches apart, or the Thunderbirds, man. One of those guys sneezes, they're all dead. How do they have that culture of trust and just being a high-performing team? It's that debriefing process. It's taking a look at inside first. And I actually help companies get better with, we call it debriefing. Because if you ever notice in a business, if something goes wrong, the boss is like, all right, let's do a post-mortem. And I'm like, did you just call it a post-mortem? I think I'm going to be at one post-mortem in my life, and I better not be awake for it. So you're already starting with a negative connotation. And then when we get into the debrief, the boss usually does what? Well, I'm like, stop. Start with I. You're the leader. You are the leader of the squadron. You start with I. We'll get to we later in this debrief, man. But this is how you lower the barriers to communication. If you come into a debrief like, all right, you screwed up and no. That's how everything spirals out of control. So I think we need to do a lot more introspection and realize our own faults and flaws before we start attacking other people. If you can heal some of your faults and flaws, great. Make the world a better place. That's why it's so interesting in the psychedelic medicine space. People want to heal and help everybody. Do it to yourself. Dov, when you get on an airliner, What's one of the first things as part of the safety brief? If we lose cabin pressure, put the mask on yourself first. You ain't good to anybody else if your mask ain't on you, and take care of you first. So again, long answer to your short question. People got to put the masks on themselves first. Otherwise, it's mass hysteria in the airplane, which is what we're seeing in this country and around the world globally.
And this is why we have to wake up and stop looking at the Donald Trumps, the Joe Bidens, the Vladimir Putins, the whoever it might be. We have a principle within our philosophy. It's called mirror principle. Anything you look out there and see is a mirror reflection of you. So heal that within you. So if they're assholes, pretty sure you can find the asshole in you. Take a look at that and say, okay, what can I do about that? What can you do with you? And I love the work that you're doing, and I'm very grateful for it, Whiz, and I really appreciate it. And I want you to know that. I will do everything I can to support you, but I also want to know how other people can support you and your foundation and what you can do, because this is important work. And again, I want to stress, this is important not just for military, our ex-military people. We're all walking around with some kind of frickin' trauma that we have to own up to and stop distracting ourselves from. So tell people how they can be part of this and how they can make a difference.
Dov, real quick, I'm so glad you said that, because I got to be honest with you, bro. I trauma shamed me. I remember I was at 30,000 feet in the air conditioning. I didn't see my buddy's head get blown off. Do not trauma shame or trauma grade yourself. If something hurt you or is hurting you, it's hurting you. We in the military do an awful job like that. Buck up, buttercup. If you're hurting, you're hurting. And I'm telling you, healing is possible. So don't trauma grade or trauma shame.
Trauma is not by comparison. Because you weren't molested by your priest and somebody else was, you can't say, well, mine doesn't count. Or because you weren't beaten by your dad every Tuesday and your mate was, it doesn't count. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And if only for one reason, not because like everybody's got to become really fragile, but because you need to heal that, because it's having a negative impact on your life. And if you think it isn't and you keep calling it the past, you're just in denial. The past is leaking all over your present and about to pollute your future.
Amen, brother. So go to nofallenheroes.com. Top right, if you're looking for a grant request, we provide healing grants to veterans, first responders, and their families. If you're a civilian and this resonates with you, we do have a wingman program that you can come on one of our retreats as long as you sponsor one of those heroes. But let's say, Whiz, I just can't afford to sponsor a hero right now. Don't worry about it. We can refer you to one of the clinics that we recommend in Oregon and Colorado. Thank you to those two states. You can do the medicines legally in those states, or we can get you down to Mexico or Costa Rica. So if you're a civilian that needs healing, I'd still love to help you. It's just we save the grants for the first responders and the veterans and their family members. And then, yeah, just follow us on Instagram, No Fallen Heroes, or official_Whiz Buckley. And then I got my, not as good as yours, my brother, but I have my own podcast. It's called Max Afterburner. When you take your left hand in a fighter jet, you go full forward on the throttles. It dumps fuel into the exhaust. It explodes, and it shoots what's called afterburner out of the back. I call it full grunt. You go to full max afterburner, man. That's how we accelerate the aircraft. And hopefully on the Max Afterburner podcast, I can help accelerate people's lives and help them heal.
Matt, thank you so much for all that you do. We really do appreciate it. We're going to make sure that all those links are posted in the show notes, so don't worry about it. If you didn't catch any of it, including all the social, we'll make sure it's all there. This has been an entirely enlightening and beautiful conversation. I'm very grateful to you, Whiz. Thank you so much for that. And for you, dear listener, remember, those who control the meaning for the tribe, i.e. the meaning of ibogaine or the meaning around any of these alternative medicines, are also controlling the movement of the tribe. You need to re-examine the meaning if you want to re-examine how to direct your tribe. Leaders committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that you've got to tap into what drives human behavior, and that is the emotional source code. I'm Dov Baron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe. Because unified, actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and for companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please, do us a favor, go to wherever you tune into the podcast from, and do us a favor, please. We need it. It helps us. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And of course, if you are a regular, big thank you for letting everybody else know about the show. Till next time, Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how you're looking at trauma, about the way you might be shaming yourself or others around it. And remember that those who are putting a context on the things that traumatize you maybe have some profit in it. You and I and we collectively need to wake up. And the only way to do that is to look within, because when we look within, we transform without. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, in your life, in your leadership impact. And I am out.